Today, we're excited to have Ralph Rodriguez from Legend Energy Advisors. With unique experience that includes real estate, energy, sales, and a black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, Ralph has mastered the art of navigating tough challenges. In this episode, he shares how he helps data center customers, especially in demanding markets like ERCOT, secure enough power through innovative strategies, streamline infrastructure solutions, and a deep understanding of energy dynamics. Stay tuned for insights that could redefine how you think about powering your operations. Ralph Rodriguez, welcome to the podcast.
Man, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, Peter.
Ralph, I'm excited to talk to you because I looked at your history and your personal background. Looks like you were in real estate for some time, but now the last 3.5, 4 years, you've been selling into, I think, the hottest market in North America, at least, which is the data center market. A lot of our viewers will be interested to hear sort of what you're seeing in the market. And also, I see you're a black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and I'll bet you that's informed and helped you be successful in what you're doing. So tell us about the transition that you went through and what it was like and what you're seeing today, selling into data centers, selling power into data centers.
Yeah, sure. So Ralph Rodriguez, Legend Energy Advisors. I've been in real estate in various capacities. I started in sales when I was 19, and then I was probably the youngest salesperson at the company that I worked for. For the time that I was in sales, which was probably 5 or 6 years, and I slowly transitioned into opportunities to build houses. So I worked for a home builder. They got sold off to the seventh largest builder in the United States, K. Hovnanian. And so I worked for K. Hovnanian for 2 or 3 years. And I just, I managed approximately 350 houses a year for them, all the P&L, all the design stuff. I mean, I had construction managers and salespeople that worked for me. And to be perfectly honest with you, I kind of got burned out, like I was working.
That's a lot of houses. I don't blame you. 350
I was working like 70, 80 hours a week, and it was like killed me, So I was in a situation where I just thought, you know what, I need to do something different or at least slow it down. And then I went into, building my own houses. And in 2008, I got stuck with 5 houses. When the market crashed, I got stuck with 5 $600,000 plus houses that I had to work on getting rid of. And fortunately, I was able to, get rid of them, and, but it killed me and took everything that I had, but.
And that was a brutal time, 2008. I go into all the people I know, including myself, that got stuck in one way or another during those years.
It's uncomfortable, right? I mean, when you're in that business, and particularly when you're the ones signing the notes and, all that, it's really uncomfortable. And I don't ever want to be in that again. I can tell you that.
I mean, and it's tough, isn't it? We've seen some crazy stuff down here in Florida just the last few years with COVID and all that and real estate prices. So
yeah, it's been nuts everywhere, really.
yeah.
The interesting thing is that whenever I lost all those houses, I had my granite guy kept coming in, and, because I needed to finish them and get them sold. And so I ended up buying his company, and I ended up building it up and, selling it in 2015. And I took a little bit of time off and was just kind of, trying to relax and get my head together and figure out what I was going to do. In the meantime, I ended up getting my real estate license and just started selling real estate, and spent 5 or 6 years doing that successfully, because I know, I've been in this Dallas market for a long time. And so I know a lot of people here, and, I've got land developer friends that develop commercial stuff. I've got, all over the board. So I was just trying to figure out what I was going to do. And after about 6 years, I thought, you know what? I could see the writing on the wall with the whole commission struggles and all the challenges that you could see that was coming down the pike, and with Zillow, and, it was just, and in the Dallas market, you were working really hard to sell houses 5 or 6 times as hard because the market was just so crazy, right? I mean, it was just
Yes, a lot of realtors came into the market. We see it down here, it's very competitive. And
yeah. Yeah, particularly in Florida, I can imagine a lot of them are going there thinking they're gonna go retire.
yeah,
Work real estate, and it's not that easy,
it's not easy at all. You're competing against a lot of folks, and there's, as you know, anytime you're dealing with the public, it's hard.
Yeah. So so, from there, I ended up, one of my clients was a programmer, and he did a lot of programming work for Legend Energy Advisors, and he kept telling me, "Man, I think you would be a great fit for this company. They've got some cutting edge stuff. We've been designing some products, a technology stack from the ground up that's cutting edge on real time energy analytics and PUE. And I think you would be, a great candidate for this job." And I thought, man, I don't know, I don't know if that's really what I want to do. I don't really know anything about energy. I don't, so how do I make the transition? And he just kept putting the pressure on me. And so finally, Dan Crosby and our COO, Nathan Cole, flew up and we had dinner. And man, I just realized these guys are sharp. I mean, like really sharp. And so I started investigating and, it took me probably 3 or 4 months before I decided to do anything. It, we had agreed that probably nothing would happen till the first of the year, and this was at the middle of the year where we were like trying to figure out, when to start and all that. And I wasn't in a particular hurry anyway, so it kind of worked out. And I said, "Hey, why don't I work for you guys for 6 months, and then let's just see if we're on the same page. You don't pay me, and I'll start on the first if you guys feel like this is going to work out." And by the same token, if I don't feel like I'm a candidate for the job, I don't want to be wasting your time and spinning wheels. I've got other things that I can do. So, and sure enough, I just jumped in and it was kind of one of those deals where they hired me because of my experience and not because of my experience in energy, but my experience in sales. I think that ties into the Brazilian Jiu Jitsu black belt deal because if you're hard headed enough to get a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu black belt, then you probably can handle getting kicked in the teeth 50,000 times when people tell you that they don't want to deal with you or that they don't have a problem, you know. And which is funny because that's kind of how the data center space treated me in the very beginning. Is I would call on them and would say, "Hey, I've been reading this stuff, and I think this ESG and this environmental stuff, and I could see all this stuff going on in Europe." And so I reached out to him and I said, "I think this is coming your way. And so I think it'd be, optimal for you guys to consider, working through some of these thought exercises, because when it does come, you want to at least have some, be prepared." And they would say, "No, they're very protective of their ecosystem." So they would just simply, kind of push me off. And I said, "Okay, I'll make you a deal. I'll just periodically hit you up just as a reminder. But at any point in time, if you see an opportunity or you recognize that what I was saying resonates with you or your company, just please call me," is all I'm asking. And then, sure enough, I started getting a few phone calls. I ended up getting a phone call from Mike Netzer with Data Center Talk. And he said, "Hey, you want to go to lunch?" And I said, "Sure." And he says, "I want to talk about power. Everybody's calling us up about power." This is like 2 years after me calling. I mean, calling on not Data Center Hawk, but on the data center space.
Yeah, the sales cycle is so long, people don't
Mhm.
realize.
Yeah, especially on enterprise sales, right? I mean, you're selling stuff. And my connection with Mike was because I knew that that they do a lot of, site selection data and, they just have a lot of information. They're connected to a lot of people. And so I was just really trying to build relationships. And those guys at Data Center Hawk were great. I mean, they were like super, super good. And we went to lunch and talked energy the entire time. And at the end of the deal, he's like, "Man, is there any way you guys to do our podcast?" And, and I said, "Yeah, sure. Let me talk to Dan Crosby, he's a founder and CEO, and see if Dan is interested in doing the podcast. 'Cause I think he'd be the best fit." for just talking all the details on energy. And so we got invited on there. He did the podcast. And then we just started getting invited to do different podcasts, Data Center Frontier, QTS Experience, Data Center Revolution with Kirk Fell. I mean, it's been a lot of really good opportunities.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
got to take
Podcasts are
advantage
great.
of them. And then we get phone calls all the time because, we're building that brand awareness.
No doubt. So I'd like to dig into sort of what your pitch is to data centers. So when you're calling them up, you guys are offering power, but specifically, are you guys is Legend sitting in between the power generator and the data center, or where do you guys fit in, and what's your
Yeah,
push?
so on a high level, there's three facets to Legends business. One of them is power and gas, power and natural gas markets, right? So we manage over $2 billion in commodity risk in both regulated and deregulated markets. So we're heavily involved in procuring natural gas and power for our clients and customizing products based on how they use energy. And so that's how Legend, that was the genesis of Legend, because Dan Crosby managed national accounts for some of the largest, brokerage houses in the country. And he got really frustrated with the fact that he just felt like their business models were very predatory. And so they just work to get you on contract, but they don't help you understand how you're using energy. So they would approach him and say, you what my bill doubled last month. Why? And he'd say, well, you used more energy. And really that's all they could do. And eventually he thought, you know what? I'm going to try to convince them to kind of modify their business model, but they weren't having any of it. People like to stick to what they've been doing. And so he had this great idea. I'm going to start this company and try to, you know, do the power and gas for these big industrials. And he started picking up gas terminals, auto manufacturers. I mean, and you specialized in power in ways that your typical energy broker didn't. And then the second thing is we do an infrastructure, utility infrastructure, where we act as the owner's rep and we help our clients on how they connect to the grid or how they, you know, all the utility infrastructure stuff, getting in the queue. Is the queue legit, are the requests legit, and what happens is these utilities have a cookie cutter approach on how they want to operate. And, so your typical engineer goes out and says, hey, they told us that the configurations need to be this many transformers, this much land. We need these different components. This is what you got to use. Then the engineer goes and uses their criteria and their specs and they stamp it. And we look at those deals and say, man, there's just a better way to do this deal based on all the components. And we come up with solutions based on market intelligence that we feel like is unlike your traditional energy advisor. And then the third piece of the puzzle is the technology stack. It's called Legend Analytics, and it's our technology stack that we developed in-house over a 6-year period of time in the most hostile environment you could ever imagine, that manages energy in real time against the wholesale energy markets in real time. So effectively helping them become net assets to the grid. Now, the data center deal has only been, it's only gotten to the point where it has been in the last couple years, right? And really the majority of it has been in the last year, the intensity, right? And I think it's because, people are jockeying for position, trying to figure out where the land's going to be. So it's been an interesting kind of, because we're involved in the ecosystem all the way across the entire ecosystem. So it's been really interesting to see how that all unfolds. But I personally feel like the real-time energy analytics platform is will eventually be one of the hottest tickets. We've already got it deployed in some, very large commercial applications that are energy intense, and it's helping companies really make their data become, actionable, and not only actionable, but auditable, right?
Right.
because at the end of the day, people want to know, and the more educated people are becoming about energy and sustainability, the more, and like even like you, an investor like yourself, you may be, those things come up, it may not necessarily be what you want to contend with, but it's the reality of where we are, right?
Absolutely. And so you're saying it's really picking up in the last year. Are you seeing it real hot in ERCOT in your market there in Texas?
Yeah, it's super hot in ERCOT. I mean, in fact, one of the interesting things to watch has been just the amount of requests in the queue, you know, just in the Dallas market alone. You've got like a market where, it's an 80 plus gig market and there's 40 gigs of requests in. So how, like you do the math, try to figure out how that's all going to unfold. And so I think, there's going to be some winners and losers. And so the losers are going to be feeling the crunch.
Are you guys seeing data centers ask for more power than they were? We're hearing all this stuff about AI, compared to a couple years ago. Are you seeing they want more power than they did previously?
Well, as a whole, just the data center, but yeah, the AI obviously has, you know, been the one of the major catalysts because everybody's trying to jump on the AI bandwagon. Data centers weren't really large loads until the last few years. So we were dealing a lot with heavy industrials, car manufacturer, blow mold injection companies, just all over the board helping, mining companies. We have some of the largest mining outfits in the entire country are our clients. Two of the largest energy users in Canada is our clients. So we're like all over the board. All of a sudden, data center starts getting focused into the picture, and then we start getting the phone calls, and then my job is primarily to drive brand awareness. I'm a brand evangelist, and I really believe that Legend is solving some big problems. And one of the reasons I know that is because almost always when we're in the meeting with the top people, we're working with them afterward. Or we're on their mind and we're going to be working with them when they get to the point where they need to, and I think it's our unique business model where we kind of tear down those silos, and I think that's one of the areas where data centers are hurting is, initially they were hurting. I think they're starting to like, reshape how they operate, because when those silos or when everybody working in their silos, that's not the most efficient way to work. And I think, the whole idea with Legend's business model of really helping the customer understand how they're using that energy and how they can be the most efficient that they can possibly be, because really the greenest kilowatt is the one that you don't use, right?
Absolutely. So, as you're seeing these guys come in, these data centers with needing more power, are they now trying to bring their own generation to the table? Or are they just purely like coming into the utility and saying, hey, give us, 1,000 megawatts or 500 megawatts?
So it's a little of both, right? I mean, some of them are just walking in initially and saying, "Hey, I need a gigawatt of power," and that gigawatt is like not going to be found. You know what I mean? And they think, well, we got a transmission line running through our property, we got a gas line running through our property, we got all these, And while traditionally speaking, those are good signs because power has been long for forever. Now we're dealing with power shortages, and these power shortages are creating these really complicated challenges. And your traditional developer that goes in and thinking, "Hey, I'm going to go entitle this project. There's a gas line running through there." I mean, you got issues. You got capacity issues. You got generation issues. We're seeing some of these projects that will not end up getting power that are even already in design. They're already being built, and that they're going to have to figure out how to operate in island mode. So now it's like, hey, how do we connect? Where do we connect to the gas line? And some of these, the power put on some of these is 7 or 8 years. If you're not going to have all the infrastructure, you're not going to be able to get that power for 6 years, then you got to figure out, am I going to bridge? between now and then? Or am I going to just go in island mode and just stay there? Do I use it for backup afterward once I connect to the grid? I mean, so there's just a lot of really interesting things going on. And I think there's going to be some people get kicked in the teeth really hard here in the next 24 months, at least 24 to 36 months when these projects start unfolding. And it's like, we don't have power. But on a positive note, we have natural gas lines running all over the country, and natural gas, especially when you're dealing with like ERCOT, that's a big deal because we have a lot of gas.
There's a lot of gas in Texas, and what one of our projects is on the Matterhorn pipeline, in which they're building over towards Houston, and there is a ton of gas. But you're right, the power is the limiting factor right now.
Well, but here's the other thing too is that people that haven't worked with gas before, which the data center industry, man, if there was a gas line running anywhere near a data center, they were like, not happening. Now all of a sudden everybody's, jumping on that. But if you don't really understand how the infrastructure part of gas and how it connects and how and figuring out all the components and how all those dynamic pieces work together, if you don't figure that out, then you're going to be behind the 8 ball. I mean, there's just no question. And there's levels to understanding this stuff. And I can tell you up front that I'm not the guy, but we have a group of guys that work on the group, guys and gals that work on the gas portion. We do daily nominations of balancing on gas, which is we're one of the few energy advisors in the entire country that does that. But understanding how to connect is a huge deal. And what we've seen is a lot of these big engineering firms are so busy and they're just, they'll do a feed study and they may throw out some cost that is exorbitant. I mean, to the point where, maybe they just they can't do any more business. And so they're just like stuck. What we've discovered is that Legends, small footprint allows us to really maneuver in a way that your big companies are not going to do. And your engineering companies, I mean, I'll give you one example. And there's companies out there that are charging more than twice as much for feed studies and then recommending that you connect to a line, and that line be 20 million than the 20 million it should have cost. So you can imagine it being double the price.
Yeah. And it's just a sunk cost for these guys, right? It's not adding any additional value to their project. It's just
yeah. And it's a lot of money, and it affects it, and how you connect really affects what you can do with that energy later on when it's time for you to figure out how you're going to maneuver, and ship things around.
Well, so talking about gas, a lot of the data center companies I know you mentioned ESG, they had strong requirements around net zero by a certain year or reducing their carbon footprint. Do you guys have anything to help them where they can, I don't know, do a VPPA and buy power from green source from wind or solar, but still have the resiliency of gas generation as well?
Yeah, we do that. I mean, anything related to energy infrastructure, utility infrastructure, and how those dynamically work together. And, a lot of it has to do with, on the ESG front, has to do with, I think, corporately, everybody. Remember when I was saying a little while ago that Europe was like, I was reading these articles for 2 years before, and then I would call on data centers using that logic and say, I think it's coming your way. And they looked at me and said, very protective of their ecosystem. Nah, we think we're good. And the reality of it is, when it came, they didn't really do a lot of digesting information because power has been so long. And this is just a new time of, sustainability initiatives that are global. I mean, the whole world's pushing sustainability and climate and all that stuff. And what we've discovered was that these people didn't really want to, they didn't want to stir the stir, how do you say, stir the apple cart?
Upset the pot,
Upset the apple cart. There you go.
Yeah.
Upsetting the apple cart, right? And so what happened is I just started, focusing on reaching out to the C-suite because those guys, they're on the hook. And I think they hired sustainability people to check the box. And I really kind of feel sorry for sustainability people as a whole. Not that, I'm feeling sorry for them like a pity party, but that they really kind of have their arms tied behind their backs, right? And
Right.
they're not really able to do a whole lot in most companies. And so I think that when I first started, I reached out to these people and, they would be on board with the idea, but getting anybody to move on anything was next to impossible. I decided, you know what, I'm changing my strategy, go to the C-suite and push down. And I think, you know, that's how we started getting into these data centers. But I think to your point, the ESG deal is something that they checked the box and they thought it was not going to be a big deal. And then when all of a sudden, everybody starts on this gold rush, it starts unfolding the way that it unfolds, and it's very uncomfortable. Now you got to go eat crow, right?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, we've seen a huge shift to gas generation. I've been in gas since 2009, and I always heard about the boom years, which was like 1999 to 2000, the last, they called it gas turbine bubble, when they just built a ton of plants. And then, really, up until now, 25 years later, natural gas power generation has been a pretty sleepy industry. But now it's just taken off, and you see the GEs of the world have, all their equipment spoken for through like 2028. So it's pretty interesting time to be in the business.
You're dealing with like the whole supply chain on switches, on transformers, and even some people that are buying those spots in the queue, essentially committing, and we're seeing that some of those deals they're letting go of them. So sometimes we get phone calls like, "Hey, look, these were on the supply chain queue, and here you are. Are you guys interested?" And we got these transformers, we've got whatever. And so sometimes we get these calls, and we're able to kind of piece these things together that make sense.
Yeah, because you're right. And we've watched the Texas Energy Fund very closely, and a couple of projects have dropped out and cited, challenges with supply chain specifically.
Yeah, it's tough. So you got to have people that are like, have line of sight on things that are connected.
Yeah, you've got to be nimble, absolutely. And
Yeah.
there's a whole, people don't realize there's a whole gray market for this stuff. Everybody just goes to the OEM and tries to get the brand new equipment, but that's one channel. There's a whole other gray market out there, and folks
Oh
that
yeah.
can
Yeah.
provide
And
services that,
everybody's in it right now. Everybody knows, right? Everybody's feeling the heat.
yes,
What do we got to do to get in these deals?
they're trying to do what they can do. So,
And I think that we're up against this. A lot of people talk about the like the battle with China. These things are real. I mean, these things are very real. And I think your average environmentalist doesn't really consider those things.
no
Uh,
doubt, it's become national security, and China's building, call it 10,000 megawatt coal fire power plants
yeah.
as fast as they can build them. And we're turning off our coal. And even in some states, they have plans to turn off the gas. And I just tell people that's cool as long as, two out of every three times you flip your light switch, the lights don't come on. If you're good with that, we get rid of
Yeah,
the coal and complete.
exactly. No,
So we got to have, I think, an all of the above approach, right? And
yeah.
leverage the fact that, we've got $2 natural gas or $3 natural gas, and China's got 10 or $12 natural gas. So we've got to use that advantage, use that to our advantage to generate as much power as we can generate, because AI is really like the new gold. It's going to generate so much value, and it's important from a national security standpoint as well.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. And here's the other thing. Everything that we do uses data. I mean, is using data that's being stored in some facility somewhere, or and
it's
it's like,
unbelievable.
and it's just increasing exponentially. So I think you just really, I think that the idea that somehow we're just going to put a pause on all of it, and while China just keeps cranking,
Yeah,
right? It's
can't
not a very holistic way of thinking about it.
No doubt.
And I'm, hey, look, I'll be the first one to tell you that, I think it's important that we try to be sustainable. I think it's important that we try to reduce emissions. I think it's like, but I also think it's important to take the ideology out of it. There is no utopia. So forget about utopia. Let's start dealing with real like facts, the reality that we're in a competitive market against a country that could, that could bury us if we're on our game.
No doubt. My favorite definition of integrity is the courage to meet the demands of reality, right? So basically, if we're telling fairy tales and living in the world of ideas that's not real, we don't have integrity as a country. We have to live in reality if we have integrity. Like an airplane that flies, the metal of the airplane has to be able to withstand the reality of the environment. Otherwise, it's going to break apart. The same goes for an energy system or a country.
No question. I totally agree. And I think this is where we're at. This is what we're up against, right? I mean, it's probably the most transformative time in history, really. And I don't really think that we really even understand what we're dealing with. I mean, even though I'm on these calls all the time with these high level people that are talking energy and way smarter than me, I look at it and I just think, I don't even really think I understand.
We're just kind of guessing at
Because
this point. I mean, maybe like Elon and Jeff Bezos and a couple of those guys understand, but I don't know very many people that fully appreciate or understand how this AI stuff is going to unfold. We don't know if it's going to be slow or fast or what it's going to do, or if it starts doing things on its own that we don't expect. There's just a lot of, unknowns at this point, but we know that we want to have the best stuff on our side. So we got to have as much power as we can have. Cause I explained to my mom, like, power is food for AI. That's just all you got to think about it. So it's
and
wild.
it's gonna like to eat gas.
No doubt. Gas is food for power and power is food for AI. So that's what we end up with. But, I wanted to ask you about data centers. We hear, of course, people think about Google and Microsoft and Amazon. They call them the hyperscalers now, I guess. But are you seeing like other kind of middle tier or not as big as maybe like a Google, but these guys like maybe they got infrastructure funding or something and they're just off there and companies that we never heard of or that maybe the average person doesn't know about?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of like mid-range that are not going to be working on building your 500 megawatt data center campus or gigawatt or multiple gigawatts. At this point, nobody really knows. There's so much going on. But there's some companies that are kind of finding their soft spot, and I think there's a lot that are doing 30 to 50 megawatt projects, like urban, those projects are smart, like, brownfield projects that if all the components make sense that, you can fill a 30 to 50 megawatt gap a whole lot easier than you can a 500 megawatt or a gigawatt.
Oh, no doubt. Because
So
they
it's I
stop.
think there's more
Yeah.
of those that are waking up to the reality that, hey, we might have to have, you know, yeah, like we
All
want to do
projects.
a gigawatt, yeah, facility. That's great. But, there's a lot of risk in that too. You got to put up I mean, you can't be a middle guy and have like mediocre capital.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. In a gigawatt, you're going to need transmission upgrades in the area unless it's complete luck. But, almost all the areas with everything that's coming on are going to need transmission upgrades. And those things just take a while, So on top of the supply chain issue, with the big project, you got both large gas turbine supply chain challenges, transformer challenges, and you got line challenges on the transmission side. So you got all that stuff. With a smaller project, you might be able to get your gas turbine, get your transformer, and maybe you don't have to do a line upgrade.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. That's a really good point. I think that it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds.
Absolutely. Well, Ralph, I think we're getting to the end here, but before I let you go, you got to give me some ideas around Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Like to the audience that wants to get into that, like Would you do it all over again? Do you highly recommend it? Like, what should people know when they're coming into it? Because people talk about with MMA, like they talk about jujitsu so much, but very few people have actually done it, you know?
Yeah, so I'm one of the hard-headed guys that have done it, right? I've been doing it for 16 years. I was a wrestler, let me start off. I actually started in judo when I was a kid and did judo for a few years. And then whenever we moved from Guam to Ohio, my dad was stationed at Anderson Air Force Base in Guam in the Air Force. He put me in those martial arts, and then later I got into wrestling, and so I wrestled. I lived in Ohio. We were stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in
That's
Ohio.
like, that's like Western Ohio, isn't it? Where is that?
Yeah, it's by Dayton.
Oh yeah, cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
it's just
family
just
over there.
outside. And so I wrestled there, and then I started raising. I had 3 kids, and raised kids. And once I got them to a certain age, I was like, man, I need to do something. And one of my friends was one of the original UFC champions. His name was Guy Mesger. Guy Mesger, I chatted with him, and he said, "Man, you ought to do it." I said, "Hey, do you think it'd be something that I'd?" And he's like, "Yeah, of course, I think you ought to do it." And so, 2009, I started training, and then it took me, approximately 10 years, little around 10 years, a little 11 years to get my black belt.
Wow. And that's with
Yeah.
the wrestling and judo.
Me and I competed all the time too, like for all the way up until about 2016. I was competing all the time. So like I
Wow.
competed at like, you know, at, everybody has their division and so there's like a 5 year age division, and then, age groups and whatnot. So I started training. So yeah, it's a lot of training, a lot of getting beat up, a lot of, being a black belt is really just a white belt that never quit is the best way to say it, which is ties into the whole sales thing, your whole data center deal, which is you're a salesperson, you're in this business, you know, let's be real. Salespeople don't oftentimes get the fairest shake, as if, their job is kind of a mediocre position or whatever. But as far as I'm concerned, sales is right there at the top. And the only way you do that is by just keep stabbing at it, learning, and, making adjustments as you go and just staying committed. Eventually, if you're in sales in the data center space and you're a white belt, you'll be a black belt. It's just a matter of time. You just got to keep in hanging out with the right people. If you hang out with the smart people and just shut your mouth a little bit and listen, you might learn something.
No doubt.
Kind of
Time.
like kind of like Brazilian jiu-jitsu. The black belt is a black belt for a reason.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, and I told you before, my dad grew up a coal miner and then became a salesman, and then he sold encyclopedias door to door, and then he became the president of sales at PF Collier, which is incredible. So I'm
Man,
standing on his shoulders. And my brothers, I mentioned to you, they're sales guys they're in Ohio also. They're in Strongsville. So we got
oh,
the
cool.
Midwestern connection. I spent a lot of time in St. Mary's, Ohio, which is over by Dayton growing up, and got family over there. So Ohio is a great state. Absolutely.
It is, and it's a great data centers. I mean, it's a great energy state. I mean, they're always putting their best foot forward for manufacturing, and
Yeah.
now seeing, you got all these data centers that are just popping up. It's really interesting.
Ohio is one, if, for a state to go invest in, I think Ohio is a huge opportunity right now.
Huge,
A lot
huge.
of people don't think of it. It hasn't tipped yet.
Yeah.
And now they're getting this Vivek Ramaswamy guy who's a big time politician from
Oh yeah.
Trump administration trying to run for governor up there.
Yeah.
And he's a major business guy, and
He's pro business. There's no question.
he'll probably
It's
cost
kind
a
of
lot
like
of money.
Texas, right? Pro
Yeah,
business, and then you have all these companies that are just moving here. Eventually, you got to find climates that are easier to work with, I should say.
yeah, no doubt. And we've had it down here with DeSantis, and I think Vivek will copy probably a lot of stuff that they've done in Texas and in Florida up there in Ohio.
Yeah. Cool.
So good stuff. Well, we'll finish up there, Ralph. Before I let you go, just tell everybody how they can get in touch with you and, re-mention your company name so that way they can reach out, because I'm sure we'll get some data center guys that are watching this.
Absolutely. My name's Ralph Rodriguez with Legend Energy Advisors. And my email is rrodriguez with a G, not a Q, at legendda.com. My number is 214-878-0083. And that's really the easiest way. Or hit me up on LinkedIn. I mean, I create all kinds of content for LinkedIn.
Yeah, that was how I found you. I was just scrolling through my feed and I saw some of your stuff and said, hey, we should talk.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I appreciate you reaching out, Peter. Really sincerely do appreciate it.
Ralph, it's been my pleasure. This has been Ralph Rodriguez with Legend Energy Advisory. And if you're a data center, need help in the power space, make sure you reach out.